Before I start this video, I would just like to ask, where were you on 9/11? I wasn't born yet, but I'm excited to hear your stories in the comments. Anyways, on to the video. The skyline of Manhattan is ever-changing, with new buildings and towers going up every year. However, in the last 60 years, one spot has changed the most: the World Trade Center site. It went from selling radio equipment to spawning some of the most iconic buildings in history. Today, I explain the history of the Twin Towers before and during 9/11 and how they shaped the world. The history of the site starts way before 9/11. Prior to the 1970s, the site was a cluster of shops dubbed Radio Row. Many of the shops here sold equipment, housing over 50 electronic stores. This was until 1943 when the New York State government passed a law giving the governor the ability to build plans in New York City. This was then forgotten about by the governor, but in the early 1950s, David Rockefeller, who was a prominent businessman in New York State, suggested building a large office complex in Lower Manhattan. This was because he thought it had potential. He also wanted to revitalize the dying area, and it was also where the ocean liners stopped when they arrived. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, you'll be seeing a lot of them later, had a decision between Radio Row and the Southside Sea Terminal. They chose Radio Row, as it was on a subway tunnel. This way, people from New Jersey could get there fast and use the complex. In 1965, the Port Authority began acquiring land, demolishing buildings in Radio Row. Due to all the complaints, the Port Authority worked to get the store owners back on their feet somewhere else, and work began on the World Trade Center. Minoru Yamasaki was announced as the building's architect in 1966, and soon after the design of the towers was finalized. With a unique elevator system using the Sky Lobby instead of crowding everyone onto one elevator for 111 floors. A new system was used where you would take a local elevator to a floor on one of the three sections, or take an express elevator to each Sky Lobby. This way, you could have multiple elevators in each shaft, saving space. Funny enough, Yamazaki was afraid of heights, so he made the windows very thin with large steel beams on each side to make the person feel secure. This was widened at the top to allow for a restaurant and an observation area. He also added buildings at the bottom to allow for more office space, a mall, and a hotel. However, their boxy appearance was criticized by philosophers and architects, one stating that they were the boxes the Empire State Building and Chrysler Building came in. The building used its perimeter, or the outer walls for you normal people, to support itself, meaning they could get more office space. The floors also had a truss system, meaning the floors would support themselves. This eliminated pillars, but this meant that when the outside was penetrated, the structure would be weakened. Construction began in 1966, but first they had to add a slurry wall, also nicknamed the bathtub, to keep water from the Hudson out. Over time, the North Tower went up first, then the South Tower. In 1973, the ribbon-cutting ceremony was done and the complex officially opened. And with that, let's take a tour of the site. First is One World Trade Center, which was an office building with a restaurant called Windows on the World. Two World Trade Center was the second tower and housed offices and an observatory on the top, with a model of New York and an outdoor area. Three World Trade Center was a Marriott hotel with a pool on the top floor and a restaurant near the lobby. Four World Trade Center was a smaller office building at the base of the towers. Five World Trade Center just across it was the same as Four World Trade Center. Six World Trade Center was similar to 4 and 5, but housed the U.S. Customs Department and had a slightly different design. It was also slightly higher. And 7 World Trade Center was separate from the rest of the complex and was an office building. In the center of the building, of buildings 1 through 6 was a plaza, and underneath that was a mall. It was called the Mall at the World Trade Center, but was to be changed to Westfield at the World Trade Center in 2002. Around the site were various works of art, including the bent propeller, the sphere, the cloud fortress, the ideogram, and after the bombings of '93, a fountain called Memorial Fountain was installed. Through the 70s and 80s, the complex would be a success, and over time, most complaints were washed away as the towers became the Eiffel Tower of America, drawing tourists from around the world. However, on February 26, 1993, a Pakistani terrorist parked a Ryder truck in the parking lot under World Trade Center 3. It exploded, causing structural damage and killing 6 people. The plan was for the North Tower to fall onto the South Tower, but it only caused light damage. 5 people were convicted in the bombing. In 2001, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey decided to make the World Trade Center complex a private property. An American investor named Larry Silverstein bought World Trade Centers 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7. World Trade Center 6 was sold to the U.S. Customs Department, and World Trade Center 3 was sold to Marriott Hotels. The mall at the World Trade Center was also sold to Westfield Malls Incorporated. However, the Austin J. Tobin Plaza, which was the plaza in the middle of the towers, remained with the Port Authority. This decision was finalized in July 2001, however, it wouldn't be for long. Now, this next section won't get into the politics, the aftermath, and the before, but we will cover the event itself. But all you need to know that a terrorist named Osama bin Laden had used bombings of embassies in Africa and also the '93 bombings from before to protest America's involvement in the Middle East. The CIA and FBI knew that bin Laden would attack, but they didn't know when and where. On September 11, 2001, the polls opened for the New York City mayoral election. The Concorde was making its first flight after the crash, and the US president was in Florida at a school. Meanwhile, the World Trade Center was opening for the day, and the hijackers were waiting in the airport to board their flight. They called each other to confirm plans and to say goodbye. At 7:59 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 took off from Logan International Airport in Boston, 14 minutes late. At 8:14 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 took off 14 minutes late as well, also from Boston. At the same time, the hijackers on Flight 11 used box cutters to attack the flight attendants. They also used the cockpit key to open the door and lure the pilots out. The plane then turned south. At 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 took off from Dulles Airport in Virginia, 10 minutes late. The hijackers told passengers to stay quiet. As the plane flew to New York City, a flight attendant then calls American Airlines describing what's going on. At 8:42 a.m., United 93 takes off about 40 minutes late from Newark Airport. At the same time, Flight 175 is hijacked via the same method as Flight 11. And the rest is familiar to who was watching that day. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 flew into the North Tower in New York City, between 93 and 99 floors, all caught on film. This traps many people inside the towers. Seconds later, Flight 77 was hijacked and flew to Washington, D.C., Only a few minutes later, calls clog up the emergency systems as people in the North Tower try to call for help, but emergency responders can only tell them that they're on their way. Some in the South Tower are told to stay put, others evacuate. It's sad because security forces blocked people from getting out of the South Tower before it was hit because they didn't have any orders to leave. Only 15 minutes afterwards, United Airlines Flight 95 flew into the South Tower between floors 77 and 89, turning immediately before hitting to maximize the damage. This was caught on many different angles as people were already pointing to the North Tower. One landing gear of the plane was flung through the building and out the other side, where it landed on a car. It was then that George W. Bush was told, "A second plane hit the tower. America is under attack." He finished the story he was reading as not to alarm anyone, then goes into another classroom to address the situation. Meanwhile, New York City fire teams arrive and start evacuating the towers. Others go into the buildings to try to extinguish the fires, knowing that they would never come back. At 9:28 a.m., Flight 93 turns toward Washington and is hijacked. People also begin to leave Manhattan in boats and via the bridges. At around this time as well, the White House and US Congress are evacuated. This was also when people were already connecting the dots and predicting that Osama bin Laden was at the forefront of the attack. At the same time, Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, at the center of the US military. The FAA orders all planes in the air to land immediately. A command center is established in World Trade Center 7 across the street. It is also now when people begin jumping from the World Trade Center. At 10:10 a.m., passengers revolt in Flight 93, causing it to rock violently. The plane did a massive nosedive, then crashed in Pennsylvania. The intended destination was later found to be the U.S. Capitol building. Finally, fire crews made it to both impact points and began using hoses and extinguishers to fight the flames, but it was in vain. Because the outside of the buildings were penetrated, the structure was weak, and molten hot aluminum from the planes was making its way down the stairs. It mixed with water from sprinklers and caused more small explosions. The floors were being melted by the flames and the burning jet fuel. At 9:58 a.m., the South Tower collapsed, raining debris on the surrounding buildings, destroying a 200-year-old church and severely damaging World Trade Center 3. Billions in America and the world were glued to their screens at 10:28 a.m. when the North Tower collapsed, taking World Trade Center 3 with it, leaving only 6 World Trade Center with a hole in it, half of World Trade Center 4, and most of World Trade Center 5 standing. 7 hours later, due to fires, World Trade Center 7 becomes the last building to collapse. This causes a cloud of smoke to cover New York City, and for days the site would continue to smolder. At 8:30 p.m., George Bush gave an address to the nation, and with that we get into the controversial part, which I'm not going to touch on. Over the years, plans for the site were developed, and all the World Trade Center buildings were reconstructed, with one World Trade Center being Freedom Tower. Plans for 2 World Trade Center have not been completed yet, and currently the site is undeveloped, but that is the only place that is not built yet. Once it's done though, the entire World Trade Center will finally be rebuilt. Though I think they should use the space for World Trade Center 2 to bring back the Twin Towers, because I just think it looks cool. There's an entire video though about how they developed the site made by Neo, so I recommend you go check that out first. The Twin Towers were truly an engineering marvel. They made memories for millions and became iconic symbols of America. In the modern day, the only place you can visit them now is, well, online, because the towers now are of course gone. Most of what was there originally isn't there anymore, the only exception being the sphere which stood in the Austin J. Tobin Plaza. Many games have recreations of the World Trade Center in it, such as games like Garry's Mod and even VR Chat. In fact, I used the Garry's Mod map for the game for footage for this video, so thanks to the creator for that. They stood in the background of many movies and songs, and were intended as a symbol of peace. However, they became the opposite. It's important to remember what the towers were, and what they meant, and not let the memory of them fade. Because isn't that the promise we made that day? To never forget?
another one of our New York affiliates, WABC, for their live coverage.
Plane overhead, and then all of a sudden I thought it sounded kind of louder. Then I looked up, and all of a sudden it smashed right dead into the center of the World Trade Center. Big flash of flame, fire coming out from all over. Then all the bricks is a huge hole right now. It almost looked like the plane probably went through. I'm not sure.
Winston, can you see? Are you on the north side there where the plane made contact?
Yes, I am. It's going to be slow with the plane.
I totally feel like we're under siege. I really do. I could go downstairs. I'm like afraid to move now. There are people running in my neighborhood.
Take two and 2, 1. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
Keep going, let's go! Come on, Glenn, you can do it, Glenn!
Cities, New York and in Washington, the trade centers here in New York have been hit by airplanes. In Washington, there is a large fire in the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated.
America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you.